We're good.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales Podcast. I'm Scott Leese here with my good friend and co host, Richard Harris. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Tired, man. I'm tired. Plus, the little Zoom thing didn't say you're recording. So now there's this little thing at the beginning that I have to,
Yeah, I was
you
waiting
know,
for that. Now you're gonna have to edit because I'm
nope,
unprofessional.
nope, nope, nope.
You're gonna leave it.
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you take a red eye last night? Is that are
No,
you
but
you're
I'm
home? But
just,
I thought you were in Tybee Island.
I was home visiting my mom as a good kid should do. And then I came home 2 days ago. I came home on Father's Day. So I made it back for Father's Day.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but I don't know. Lately, like I'm just old, dude. Like every time I travel, like I'm just like napping constantly. So like, give me a give me a sweater and a place to nap. I'm old.
Oh
So,
man, I'm
so
gonna get you a travel blanket and a nice little head pillow for
I
your.
have a travel blanket.
Oh my
So
God, this is the state that we are in. We are excited to talk to our guest today. He is the founder of CalmOcean Sales, fractional CRO, sales leader, and many times over executive sales leader. Mike Muhlfelder, we appreciate you spending some time with us, man. How's it going? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Oh, it's great to be here. So I'm super excited. And I'm also
Oh,
old and
good.
tired, Richard, so I guess we could
we can
compare notes.
commiserate.
Yeah,
We could
you
we
guys.
could we could go get the the special where we get for $5.99 we get a steak and a baked potato. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're home by 5:30. Sounds great.
Right. Something like that, right? Down at Boca del Vista. Right. So
Oh,
um
you guys. All right, Mike. One of the taglines on your website is "We don't have enough pipeline. Something is just off," and that is probably the number one issue that people have right now. So, my question for you is, where are you seeing that come from? How are people dealing with it? And yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Now we can consume a lot of time on this. It's kind of it's epidemic. It's not kind of, it's an epidemic. Like everybody that I talk to seems like, oh, we don't have enough pipeline. And I think that's been, true across my entire career. Like I don't know that I've ever been in a situation or run a team where I was like, please turn off the spigot. We have way too much to handle right now. But there's a lot of things that have happened, especially over the last, I'm going to say 15 to 20 years in sales that have not helped with the pipeline problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest one is that somewhere along the way, we lost how to qualify. So what happens is, and I see this in my clients, I can see it going back in my time as a leader, that you end up putting more into the pipeline in order to offset the fact that we're not working on qualified opportunities. So to kind of try to illustrate that a little bit, my last company that I worked at full time, we generally had between 1.8 to 2.5x pipeline going into a quarter, right? You're always shooting for at least 3x. A lot of companies now are 5 and 6x, and that's a whole nother conversation, by the way. And somehow or another, even with 50% or so, 60% of the pipeline production that we needed, my teams were consistently between 75 and 95% plan. And we did that because we were ruthless about our qualification and
Mm-hmm.
who we spend time with. So there's a lot of things that wrap into that. So if I'm not good at qualifying opportunities, I end up spending time on unqualified opportunities at the cost of the qualified opportunity. And I lose the qualified opportunity to a competitor because I'm distracted. So, in fact, I'm working on an article right now about this. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people very focused on the mission and on the job, so that the deals that they work are deals that actually have the components to bring it to a close. And that includes, do I have an actual project? That's the biggest thing. Do I have an actual project? Meaning there's a defined timeline, meaning that a senior executive has directed the person I am talking to fix the problem, meaning that there is a catalyst, an actual trigger event that caused your prospect to have a conversation with you. Because in B2B sales, there's always, and I mean always, a trigger event. Something happens, something
Yeah,
broke,
something happened, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
that caused the prospect to raise their hand or reach out or take a call from you. And that's the very first thing that we want to understand, to know that it's qualified. It's worth spending time. And then we can get into, the discovery and figuring out, can I technically solve the problem? Is the cost of inaction greater than the cost of change, or the other way around, right? Because otherwise they're not going to invest. They're not going to spend the money, and it's always about the money. So we don't have enough pipeline is another way of saying we may not be working on a fully qualified pipeline.
And why, I guess what I'm thinking of as you're talking about this is what caused people to stop qualifying? Because I don't feel like, let me try to phrase this the right way. Nobody in sales leadership or an individual contributor role suddenly was like, hey, everybody, let's stop qualifying. This is a waste of time. We don't need to do that. But something happened. So what's the thing that happened that got everybody away from qualifying? Did the quotas get so big that everybody was just like, who freaking cares? We have to just like let anybody in. Like what triggered that abandonment of qualification?
I would love to have that answer. I think there's a bunch of things that happen. One is that, and I feel somewhat responsible for this because, and I wrote about this at one point. I was in the proverbial room when this happened, which is I was selling CRM when it was even before it was called CRM, but at the time I was working for Siebel Systems, and this pipeline metric of 3x pipeline to make quota came up. We're talking like 1998, 1999. And everybody's like, yeah, that makes sense because if you have a 30% close rate, but that's kind of wonky math. It doesn't really make sense when you kind of take it down. So we just started adding more pipeline. Then we said, oh, what if we got 4x or 5x? And what we did is instead of getting better at selling and going, selling 2 million instead of $1 million, we went the other way. So we just kept pouring more into a leaky bucket. And then you get out to the other side of the 2008 crash, and all of a sudden the market is flush with money. And I mean, people will probably get upset and a little offended that I'm saying it, but I think we in sales got a little bit lazy. And we stopped doing the very fundamental things that have existed in sales for
So you could argue you could argue then perhaps we just started like playing down to the level of the competition, and now the competition level is higher and we've been unable to adjust.
Yes.
Right? Down to the level meaning, oh, I can still win by, not doing some of the things that I know I need to do in the sports kind of terminology, right? And now you can't get away with those things anymore. And everybody's struggling, right?
Right. Yeah, and you hear things that, when I'm on forecast calls, this has been going on for years, and we stomped it out pretty well. It's like, oh, well, I'm only, I know it's not really qualified, but I'm only spending a few minutes on it. Well, you shouldn't be spending any minutes on it if it's not qualified. You can put it into your lead bucket and work on it until it becomes qualified. Even worse, well, I don't really have enough to do, so I'm going to work on these deals. And
go ahead.
Somehow that became acceptable in sales leadership. And I can tell you, again, I don't want to be like the old guy on the porch that, get off my lawn. But back in the day, we just didn't operate that way. If it wasn't qualified, we didn't spend time on it. That was it. Move on, go find something you can sell.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think the challenge though is that there's not one thing, right? Like there's never just one thing, right? I think I agree with you about the part that we got flush with money in 2008. I think, it started out really well with the whole predictable revenue model from Aaron Ross, right? And the advent of the SDR. Well, I also think that AEs got lazy because of the SDRs.
Yes.
Right. I'd love for there to be some analysis of like people who had legit SDR roles. How much better are they at sales than AEs who never did it? Right. One would think that they'd be better. Right.
Right.
Just because, even if it's just cold calling, like, because they're less afraid of all that stuff. But I'd love to see that. I also think the goals got really high. I think that at an executive level, we have a lot of um, inexperienced younger executives because they're getting this money thrown at them in the world we live in, right? And they don't know how to manage a pipeline. They've never built a pipeline. You know, the only pipeline they actually built was actually maybe a physical pipeline, like whatever their product pipeline is or whatever that is, right? So I think this culmination of all this stuff. And now we're throwing AI into it, right? Like now we're throwing this whole other thing, which I think is helpful, but I think it's going to get abused too, right? I think it's going to get abused and
Already happened.
misused, right? So as you work with companies, right? I got a couple of questions. My first question is, let's start with that founder stage, right? And they're starting to go after their first sales hire, right? What are the things that you think a founder should know or should have accomplished, not on the product side, but on the business side? You know, do you think there's a magic number of customers? Do you think they need to pitch this stuff? Do you think they have to have this much ARR, MRR? Like, what are those things that you think are important at the early stage? And then after they make that first hire, what should they be looking for?
So the very first thing that a founder needs to do, be able to do, and this is going to sound really weird, but um,
We like weird.
I'm good at weird.
Yeah. Austin
Is
Scott likes to keep Austin weird, as they say.
yeah, I think I've seen that shirt, keep Austin weird.
Yeah.
But be able to actually state succinctly the business problem that your solution solves. No
Yes.
features, no functions. What is the problem that you solve? And then you, as the founder, need to be able to sell it. Right. So there's a wonderful book written by Bruce Cleveland, who I, disclaimer, worked for really at Siebel, um, called Traversing the Traction Gap. And it's about starting with minimum viable market and building up to minimum viable product, like, and actually taking a step-by-step approach so that you don't just think that I've got something really cool and I'm going to go hire a salesperson who then can't sell it. And I'm going to get frustrated and I'm going to fire that salesperson and go hire another salesperson who also can't sell it. You, as the founder, have to be able to sell it yourself. And
How do
not
you define when you believe a founder can sell it themselves, right? Because so often, and Scott, jump in on this too, because I know you work with people, you know, they go get their first 10 customers, their first
Yep, that's
15
about the right
customers,
number. Yep.
right? But oftentimes that's friends and family, right? That's and they're buying the founder. They're not even buying the pain because to your point, the founder doesn't know how to articulate it well. Is that enough to go get a salesperson? Or is it like, no, there's this thing you keep missing?
Well, I think there's the metric is going to be a little bit different, right? So some of the investors that I talk to are looking, they don't really want to talk to you until you've got $1 million of ARR. And okay, well, that's great. But if you're selling a solution that's $250,000 a year, that's only 4 customers.
Right.
So I think that 10 customers is a pretty good metric to shoot for, and then pull out of that the ones that bought because, oh, well, Mike Muhlfelder knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Buy from him. And you need
It's really 10 customers that you had to acquire the way you'd be asking other people to acquire them.
Yes, even if they were referred by the friend, and Scott went to Richard and said, Michael knows what he's doing. You should buy from him. Richard still has to run his own evaluation. That's what we're looking for, is people who are like, okay, you've got some credibility, but I still don't know that I want to give you my money. Can you solve the problem or not? And is it an idea versus an actual solution? Now, I actually love this part of Shark Tank, right? When you watch that show, and you watch how the sharks operate with people and the questions that they ask right up front. Where did the idea come from? They want to know, does the person know their numbers? And then you've got, very quickly, Mr. Wonderful. We'll talk about him on another podcast. But when he says like, this isn't a business, it's a hobby. That's what I'm looking for when I talk to a founder is like, is this an actual business? Because the fundamentals of business have not changed and will not change. We exist to sell whatever it is that we sell to make a profit for ourselves or our investors. That's it. Everything else is noise. So if whatever it is that you want to sell or bring to market cannot make a profit for you and or your investors, you have a hobby, not a business.
I really like that. I was just typing to Scott. I think Scott runs his like a business. He might rightfully say that I run mine like a hobby sometimes. Right? Would you? I think that's a fair statement.
I think I would say that. I think that's fair sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I do that.
It depends.
It depends on the moment, right?
Yeah,
and sometimes Scott wishes it was a hobby.
That's true. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, to an extent, a founder should be as passionate about their business as if it were a hobby. Hobbies are things that we do because we really, really enjoy it. We want to do it. And if you don't feel that way about your business that you've built and you've nurtured, you are in the wrong business.
That's really interesting. That's really, really cool. What's AI gonna fuck up for us? Or what is it already fucking up for us?
So,
which I think might be the title of this podcast. Now that
well, you'll get a lot of attention if you do.
Yeah,
good and bad. I'm a huge fan of AI. I'm a proponent. I think the potential and the possibility that exists is truly limitless, and it is also the single biggest change in business, maybe ever, certainly since the Industrial Revolution. However, I don't think people really understand how to use it in the different ways you can use it. I'll give you an example. I have every Father's Day, I go on a cycling trip, 3-day cycling trip with friends. And this is an interesting group of guys. It's all guys, by the way. About half of which are retired. And these are like retired Ernst & Young partners and attorneys and like guys who've done really well. And we're talking about AI at one point. I think it was over breakfast. And what I realized and what I started to show these guys, they're all using maybe ChatGPT a little bit, and they're intimidated by it. They haven't heard of or using other tools like Gemini, like Perplexity. And I explained to them, guys, it's different tools for different jobs. ChatGPT, I find to be great for writing. Gemini is great for taking a lot of content and putting it into one piece of content that I can use. Perplexity is great for research, data-driven research, different tools, different jobs. So I think the same thing has to happen here.
Quick question, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you Google something first or do you AI it first?
Depends upon what it is. If it's something really simple, I still do Google.
Okay.
But if it's something that I know, I actually want to know about this, I want to learn about it, then I use AI. Like,
gotcha.
So
anyway, I just wanted to capture that, but go back to your thought.
No,
if I didn't distract you too much.
It's fine. And and I, by the way, I'm a super curious guy, intellectually curious. So when someone brings me something, can be about history, can be business, whatever. If it doesn't seem right, I want to research it. Or if it seems right but interesting, I want to research it. I want to know more. Which, by the way, salespeople, this is who we historically have been, right? We know. Oftentimes, if you're in a particular industry, you know a lot about a lot, and if you're, a generalist, which is where I started, you know a little about a lot, and you still have to be able to do that. A concern that I have with AI, I'll give you an example. It's enterprise forecasting. I won't mention any vendors. When you're selling an enterprise deal, you've got anywhere from 6 to 12 people involved in that deal. You can have all of the buying signals that AI says, oh, this deal is going to close. And you have it on your commit and everybody's we're ready to ring the bell. It looks great. Well, what AI still can't do is it can't understand or predict human behavior. So on Friday, you think you're closing a deal on Monday, and over the weekend, Richard goes to a cookout with Scott. And Scott says, "Oh, you're thinking about CalmOcean Sales as a fractional head of sales? I got a friend who does that. In fact,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
my brother-in-law. You should talk to him." And all of a sudden, on Monday, there's
Blows
no
it up.
deal anymore.
Yeah.
Boop, it's gone. And this happens all the time, and AI can't predict that. So that takes us back to the basics of selling
And
and,
qualifying.
and qualifying. And I think I'll say this and then I'll pause. I think the flaw right now in AI is that in order for it to really be the magic that we want it to be, you have to fix or address and understand the underlying process to whatever it is that you're using the AI for. Because back in the day, when I started selling ERP in 1995, it was, if you automate a process, using workflow, if it's a bad process, you get worse faster. With AI, you're going to get worse at hyperspeed.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you gotta look at the process and say, all right, here's what we want to have happen. What are the prompts and what's the right AI tool to layer on top of that? Whether it's for outreach sequences, whether it's for forecasting, whether it's proposal generation, whatever it is. What is it that we want to have happen? And let's find the tool that does that, not just say, oh, we'll just use ChatGPT.
No,
Well,
I love it.
you've actually
Chris,
go
sorry.
ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say that Chris Beal
Yep.
has always said, you know, and long before AI, be careful because you're just going to accelerate the suck,
Yes.
right? Like that's his
Chris is very
quote,
smart.
and I really really appreciate him, and he, to your point, AI is just going to accelerate the suck.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, I love what you said is it can't predict human behavior, and Scott knows this. I've spent the last 4 to 6 weeks uploading everything about me in ChatGPT, right? Because I've found that my prospects are now finding me there regularly. Like 4 out of the last 7 people who found me have come from ChatGPT. And but I just messaged Scott to say, I wonder if ChatGPT could predict my behavior on something now that it has so much, because it actually has the information about me and but anyway, I'm going to go play with that. But I love that point that it cannot predict the human behavior yet. And I have not heard anybody say that, but that's
So I'm
genius.
not putting in a plug for Perplexity. I actually did this yesterday because I was doing some other work, and I put into Gemini, Perplexity, and ChatGPT the same prompt. Who is Michael Muhlfelder?
Ooh,
Perplexity
uh-huh. Nailed
actually
it.
nailed it. And
Yeah.
who I am, what I do, what I talk about, my 4 W's of qualifying, it was all there. I was like, oh, careful.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
I was actually gonna ask about the 4 W's of qualifying because I basically did some research through your not through AI but through your LinkedIn profile, and you have famously replaced BANT
Yeah,
with the 4 W's: what, why, who, and when.
yeah.
So, how do you go about training a sales org or sellers to kind of pivot from this checkbox heavy sort of methodology to more of this narrative based kind of qualification?
So thank you, Scott. So the checkbox heavy stuff does work and it has its place, especially in enterprise selling.
Still, you still
It
believe it?
does, it does, but as a place to memorialize the work that you're doing and to make sure that you are
Yeah.
hitting the steps, right? You still want to make sure
I
that,
call that the exit criteria, right? From one
yeah,
stage to the next, you do need to know some things.
exactly. I still
Totally.
want to know that I've got the executive decision maker. I still want to know that I understand the decision process. I've identified I got all that. And I do think that it has its place. However, I think where we kind of went astray, and I've used Medic in a few different companies, is that Medic doesn't tell you if you have a qualified opportunity.
Amen.
It
Jesus.
tells you it gives you a process map for a longer engagement. And the way the 4 W's came about was I was CRO for a company called Map Anything that got acquired by Salesforce after I left. We were early days of using a recording solution similar to Gone or Chorus. And I was on a plane listening to SDR calls. And on the call, the prospect said to my SDR, "Are you banting me?"
Mm-hmm.
And which, like, obviously that got my attention. And the tone of the call changed immediately, became more contentious, less
Yeah,
friendly,
yeah,
less
yeah, yeah,
conversation. So I was like,
yeah.
okay, well that's weird. So I then started listening to some other calls to see if it was like, is this gonna a repeating pattern? And it was.
Well,
Now,
it doesn't feel good when you know this stuff and you know what somebody's doing. You're like,
yeah,
come
yeah, and
on, man.
right. So when you want to buy something, and this is kind of the answer to the question. When you want to buy something, you want to be treated as a human, right? And when people come to the SDR call, and I love SDRs, I built one of the first SDR teams back in 2012, 2013. But they now come to those conversations and they're like, all right, I'm going to talk to the sales guy. He's going to ask me a bunch of questions, and one of them is going to be
Yeah,
budget. And I'm
yeah,
ready for that budget question. And nobody gives an honest answer to the budget question, not because they don't want to, but because they're not allowed to give you the budget number, or they're afraid if I tell you I have $100,000, you're going to come in at
or they
90.
don't know it, or they
Or
don't
yeah, or
actually
I don't
truly
know it.
know it.
So why ask a question that is going to create an adversarial situation?
Great point.
So like it took some tweaking to get this. So the four W's, the first question we ask. So we do the, whatever Sandler close or whatever you want, upfront commitment. We're going to do this, you're going to do that, and we're going to decide, should we work together? Is that fair? Yeah, that's fair. But then they say, hey, Scott, let me ask you a question before we get going. What happened that caused you to reach out to me or to my company? Or if it was outbound cold call and you took the meeting, Scott, just out of curiosity, everybody's calendars are jammed. What did we say to you that made you want to take this meeting? What happened? So there's a bunch of things here. One, I'm now engaging human to human, which is what I sell to humans. I don't sell to General Motors or whatever. I sell to another human being who has human problems and human needs. So the first thing that's happening in that question is I'm saying to somebody, you're a human and I'm a human and I want to help you. The other thing that happens in that, this was kind of a side discovery, is that a lot of times when you're doing the qualification call, you're dealing with somebody who's at a mid-level in the organization. And I don't mean this in any derogatory way. They oftentimes don't get asked their opinion of anything. They get told to go do something. So now along comes this human salesperson who says, oh man, what happened? Now we've recorded those calls. We had one guy go almost 11 minutes. Oh, well, this happened and this happened. And then Mike said this to Scott and Scott said this to Mike. And I thought they were getting a fight.
11 minutes.
Yeah, because you have to, you
Dude,
teach
you'll
them
hear
this.
about the cat. I do this too. And it's like, you'll hear about the cat too.
Yeah, just shut up. Let him talk.
Yes.
Let him talk. And then you can say, okay, oh, that's amazing. Got it. Now, that what happened is going to usually tell you that question in of itself is if you have a deal or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because one of the things you also want to dial into is it personal pain that we're solving for, or is it actual institutional pain? So the next question gets into well, why do we have to solve it now? Which is a bit, that's a salesy question. But what we want to understand is like, it's not about pain. This is one of the things that I also discovered. We were taught for the last 30, 40 years, sell the pain. Nobody buys because of pain. Nobody changes anything because they're in pain. If that was true, we'd go to the doctor all the time. I mean, I hurt my shoulder in August and finally went to the doctor in February and had surgery in April.
I'm right there. I just went yesterday.
Hey, and you haven't hit rock bottom yet. You haven't had any
exactly.
urgency. There's
It's
no
not,
urgency behind it.
yeah, you want the urgency. You want to know they're in an untenable situation or headed to an untenable situation. That's when change happens in humans and in organizations. This is one of the mistakes, by the way, in forecasting that I don't think AI yet has picked up, which is the pain significant enough to drive change? Otherwise, we're just wasting our time. So then the next question is, who in the organization owns this project? I'm not calling that person. And I've had people say, oh, well, I don't want to tell you that. It's like, I'm not calling the person. And I'll be very honest. The reason I'm asking is because in today's world, nobody has time. So if your CIO or CFO has directed you to fix this, I know that this is an actual project because the CFO doesn't want somebody wasting time on on something that they're not going to buy, and the CFO doesn't want to sit and review 8 different proposals for something they're not going to buy. So
Well,
that's what
soon they won't have to do that at all. They'll just
true. Yeah,
run it
the
through
AI
their
will
sort
do
of
it. Yeah.
buyer decision model. Boom.
Boom.
Yeah.
And then the last question is, when do you need to be in production? Not when are you buying?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
When
When do
did
you
you?
need this live by?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that will also say like, well, I got to be live in 2 weeks, and and your product takes 6 months to implement. We have a problem. And
Right.
in the other ways, like in where we're going now with solutions is we got stuff that implements in hours. So if
Yeah.
somebody says I got to be live in 2 weeks, you say, well, how about if I give you a link and you're up and running in 2 hours? What would that do? So those are the gates that get us into, are we going to have a sales conversation? I'll give you this analogy and then I'll pause again. We've all almost everybody's bought a car. If you walked into a car dealer, a BMW dealer, and you're in your Led Zeppelin shirt, dungaree jeans, you pull it in your
This is
1990
exactly how Scott would do it.
That sounds exactly like
1999
me.
Honda Accord. You lift the door up and you shut it and you walk in and you look at that beautiful 4 Series in the showroom and say, I want to take that out for a test drive. This, they're not going to just throw the keys at you and say, oh, absolutely, go have fun. Let me know. They've got questions. They want to see your
Yeah.
driver's license and take a
They want
picture of it, right?
to see your bank statement if you try to do that with a Lamborghini.
Yeah, exactly. So, and by the way, it may be that you just hit the lottery or you're a rock star and that's how you dress. But they still want to know, is this guy going to steal the car? Has he never driven before? Has he never driven anything more than a Honda Accord and he's going to wrap it around a telephone pole across the street? That but for some reason in tech sales we don't qualify that way. We say, "Oh, you called me or you hit my website. It's time for me to sell you something."
Love it. Love it. Love it. We need to sort of pivot here for a minute. Going to do a quick blurb to our sponsor, Vasco, who we really appreciate coming on board to sponsor the Surf and Sales podcast and the event, which is happening in October. Mike, now that you've had your shoulder surgery, we expect to see you in Portugal at Surf and Sales. Maybe take my spot in case I have to have surgery. But anyway, I want to thank Vasco for coming on board. If you don't know about Vasco, imagine you're sitting there on Monday and dragging feet, going into your weekly boardroom or sales meeting, and sales miss their number, and we want to blame marketing for the leads, right? The terrible leads, and marketing pushes back, and customer success shrugs, and RevOps is trying to put all this stuff together. Vasco helps get through all that noise and pull the data and your billing systems to account revenue forecasts, and helps with day-to-day action and execution. So they're a little bit of an AI play on the back end, just helping to figure out that single source of truth. So if you have not checked out Vasco, please go check them out. And we greatly, greatly appreciate them coming on board to support us. So Mike, this is the part as we start to wrap of, what question can we answer for you, or questions?
I'm curious because like across the three of us, we have, I don't know, I'm going to guess here somewhere 60, 75 years of sales.
Ouch. I was just doing the math and he said it. Scott's got 10. We have the rest.
All right.
Scott's the babyface assassin of sales.
10. I got more than 10. Come on.
Yeah, I know. You still got the baby face though. So I'd appreciate, own it.
I guess, and I appreciate the reactions. To me, one of the hard things, as a solopreneur working remote, like this is my team. Um, I don't ever want to think that like just believe my stuff, right? Because that's easy to do. So I'm curious, what your feedback on some of the things that I've said, and where do you both see the B2B sales world going? Do you think we're going to have more salespeople, fewer salespeople? Is AI going to actually displace workers the way I think it will? What do you think we are?
A lot of stuff going on there. First of all, from the things that you said, your philosophy and everything, I mean, Richard and I have been nodding our head saying, yep, 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 yep. So I think we're very well aligned on how we think about things. I never subscribed to BANT or Medic or MedPick or any of that kind of stuff ever. That's my stance on that stuff. So I think you and I are aligned philosophically on the kind of where we're headed front. I mean, the fun part is that it's anybody's guess. And if you say we're all doomed, a large number of people will throw rocks at you and tell you you're an idiot. And if you say everything is going to be status quo and this is all a fad, then a large portion of the room will throw rocks at you and tell you you're an idiot. So, I think we're at that phase where like some people fervently believe we are beyond the point of no return and jobs are going to be disappearing. Intelligence and low level like knowledge working jobs are going to be gone. And then it's only a matter of time before it moves up market as the technology gets stronger. Labor jobs are safe for now until robotic versions, humanoid robots can do some of those jobs. And then what? That's my belief, which gets rocks thrown at me and also gets some people who are deep in this space nodding their head saying, yeah, it's actually probably even worse than you're saying, Scott. So I've been kind of outspoken. I would say I've been more outspoken than some, at least with my platform, about how I feel about this stuff. I feel decently strongly that I'm right. I don't really want to be right, if I'm being honest with you. I don't like the direction that it's going. We've got so obsessed with perfection and efficiency that it's going to cost us everything. Everything external. We forgot that part of being human is making mistakes and not scaling perfectly. Oops. So for the sake of what? Capital, for the sake of making more money, we decided to basically eradicate the need for humans. This is problematic for me. But unfortunately, I think we're past the point of no return. So I have to try to find positives. And some of the positives are, well, if everything external that human beings have had to worry about for so long is taken care of, what is left for us to think about and explore? Well, a lot of that is internal stuff. It's mental health, it's spiritual health, it's longevity, it's all the biohacking kind of trends, it's personalized medicine, personalized diet plans, because the three of us are all different and you need blueberries and I need strawberries and Richard needs pineapple. And that's different based on who we are. And eradication of illness and eradication of disease and expedited healing from injury and things like this. Those are positives that I think can and hopefully will come from all of this stuff. We're just going to have to like lean way more into that, or it's going to get real dire and real depressing quick, I think. That's my take. I'm very curious to hear Richard's
before Richard goes, I just want to hit one thing on what you said about mistakes, because I think mistakes are magic, right? I try to get my first mistake out of the way early in the morning because I make a lot.
6 a.m. every day. Mike makes his first mistake, waking up.
Yeah, when my kids were in elementary school, they had a teacher who taught them a whoops to wahoo. When you make a mistake and you turn it into something magnificent, and that happens all the time. And it's like, there's an old story about, some engineer who made a massive mistake at a tech company and cost the company like $10 million. And he got called into his boss's office, like, I'm getting fired. And the boss said, why would I fire you? I just paid $10 million to train you. Mistakes are okay. But you're right. We're trying so hard to be perfect that it creates anxiety and all this other stuff. But anyway, Richard, I
yeah. So
under here.
I agree with Scott, and it's interesting. I think it was interesting to hear Scott say the labor jobs are safe for now. Meanwhile, every technological advantage in the last 150 years feels like it's hit the labor jobs, right? Farming industry and automobile industry, manufacturing, all those kind of things. And now it's coming after the white collar people like us, right? it's coming after the bankers, right? Imagine the AI is just going to tell you no in the bank loan, right? You can't even get a hold of somebody easily, right? So I think that we are to a large degree doomed, and I do get worried about, well, what are we going to do with all these people who aren't making money, right? What happens? Because you're not going to have money to buy stuff and do things, so that's a big thing. I do think in a sales world, when I get super specific, right now, the safest place to be in sales is up market, where your decision makers are mid-market enterprise, where there's 5 or 6 teams that have to do it, where there are multiple humans involved in the decision-making process, right? Like I think the and it'll be interesting in the SMB market. If you think about the Yelps of the world, right? Like if I'm a small business restaurant owner, right? Am I going to take what percentage of those owners are going to want to go do all this stuff on Yelp and AI use, right? A percentage will, but I think there'll also be a percentage who still want to talk to a human. So, it's a real flex, like it's a real pivot moment, right? Like we're right there, and we're looking. We got to figure out in the software sales startup world, how do we cross this chasm and not fall into the abyss in the chasm? And
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody has that solution yet. I don't know. And I don't know that there will be. Like, that's the part that scares me.
Yeah.
I think there's some good stuff that's happening. I think that's going to enhance and help. I also think I'm more fearful than I've ever been about job security, right? The other place where I don't think AI or the robots will kick in is professional sports, right? Of the athlete.
Yeah,
The trainer might, the massage therapist might become a robot, all those other things. We're already seeing it in sport. We already see it in baseball, right? Like how often, theoretically, pitchers don't get to necessarily call their pitch as much as they used to, right? We're seeing it probably in the NFL and football to the quarterback and stuff like that, right? Like anyway, so the athlete, Scott, we need to get our boys back to being professional athletes.
It's too late. It's too
Too
late.
late. I know. I don't know. Bodie, I haven't even told you about Bodie's SEAL thing that he went to, but Bodie's my last hope, right? He's going to be my Obi-Wan. Anyway, so that's where I think it's going. So, and what I'm concerned about.
I think so. I think we're pretty well aligned. I'm trying very hard to be and remain positive. I think what I'm watching right now, and I haven't seen it yet, is for a company to realize that we all say, oh, we're humans selling to humans, but I'm not seeing a company actually embrace it. Meaning, I want humans to interact with other humans in a human way.
Yep.
And that's what I'm going to.
I think that will happen. That will happen after this current wave.
Yeah.
Right now, everybody's enamored and trying to figure it out and all that.
Over-indexing.
And inevitably will happen is there'll be backlash and people will. And I made this post as a joke yesterday morning. All I wrote was a human being wrote this post.
Yeah.
And it's a joke, but that will be the rallying cry. There will be a point of pride, and there will be
the subject line.
Certain buyers who only want that. There'll be a whole movement, an anti-AI sort of like movement. So I see that wave coming, but not for a little bit. But I do see that wave.
As humans, we crave authenticity and simplicity. And what are we doing? We're making people less authentic, and we're creating all kinds of complexity in everybody's life. Just make it. So much of the deals that I've won or my team has won is because we just made it really simple on the buyer.
Yeah. So hopefully with the advent of all this stuff, we can actually start focusing on solving more important problems than how do I make my sales team sell more shit? Because if we're being honest, we haven't built many companies or many products that actually solve real human problems and challenges, right? Like the lifespan stuff that matters, planet stuff that matters, right? These types of things in medicine, in green, in energy. It would be interesting to see people start taking swings at some of these things rather than, hey, Mike, I got a cool piece of Martech for you, so you have a better list of people to fucking cold call all day. I'm so bored and tired with these types of companies. I can't even begin to tell you.
This is the reckoning that's coming.
Yeah,
I'm
here for it.
And the
I'm here
reckoning
for
that's
it.
coming is that there's only so many dollars, and there's a lot of fucking noise out there, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of shit in the market that people are like, how many MarTech solutions do you need? How many CRM
Yeah,
solutions do you need?
exactly.
How many AI solutions do you need? How many like I need
There
one
we
of
go.
those, one of those, one of those, one of those. And the fact that there's 50 or 100 or 1,000 in any sector, and I can create an app on Lovable overnight, and like that's
Yeah.
great, but there's only $1 to be spent. And that's
Yeah.
the reckoning, is like, this is a cycle, right? And then it all gets flushed out, and then we build it back up again. Now, fortunately, my age, I'll probably, this is probably my last cycle. So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see if
Yeah,
We'll see.
I think Scott and I are both offline. We're like, man, we got to take the money and run, and we got to
Yeah.
invest, right? We got to we got ourselves up. Like, I do appreciate that part.
Yeah.
I like what you just said, that I would love to get Mike and just take that one part where he says there's so much shit in the market and just put it on a loop for like 15 seconds, right? On a TikTok loop. There's so like, what's
There
wrong
you
with
go.
sales? There's so much, that's the title. There's so much shit
Over
in
and
the market.
over and
There's so
over.
over and
Yeah,
over
yeah,
and
yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
Well, we appreciate you spending time with us this
Oh, this has been
afternoon, Mike.
awesome, guys. No, thank you.
Yeah,
Love it.
enjoyed the conversation, the tactics, the philosophical debate, and everything like that. Check him out, Mike Muhlfelder, CalmOcean Sales. He's on LinkedIn. Best place to message him is probably right there. And yeah, we will see you all next time on the Surf and Sales podcast. Take it
Thank you
easy.
See you,
very
everybody.
much.
Thanks, Mike.